The knock on my door that morning sounded ordinary, but when I opened it, my daughter was standing there with her little boy and a single backpack. "Just for the weekend, Mom," she said, eyes avoiding mine. I believed her. I shouldn't have. That weekend stretched into 11 years, into a lifetime neither of us saw coming. My name is Vivian. I'm 68 years old. And what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and forgiveness. The doctor looked at me, then at Ethan, who was quietly lining up tongue depressors on the counter by shade of color. "Well," he said gently, "it looks like you're handling it now." That day, I began learning what it meant to be his world. I enrolled him in speech therapy, occupational therapy, and behavioral support. I learned that he needed the same breakfast every day: scrambled eggs, toast cut diagonally, nothing touching on the plate. Some a bid don't change. He was running his new company by then, a small startup he called True Thread Technologies, a name that made me smile. "Because truth connects everything," he said simply when I asked. It was classic Ethan: minimal words, maximum meaning. The employees were mostly young adults on the spectrum, some who had been told their whole lives they'd never hold jobs or live independently. Ethan didn't see their differences as weaknesses. He saw them as strengths. "Patterns," he said. "They notice patterns." When I visited the office one afternoon, it was quiet except for the gentle tapping of keyboards. No harsh lights, no ringing phones, just calm focus. On the walls, there were large prints of abstract shapes, color gradients that looked random until you stared long enough to see their hidden order. Ethan was sitting at his desk with headphones on, his posture relaxed but alert. When he saw me, he took the headphones off. "You're early," he said. "I brought lasagna," I said, setting down the container. His mouth twitched in what, for Ethan, was a smile. "Good." I looked around the office. The young man at the far desk, Stephen, was the same student I'd fought for 20 years ago when I was still teaching. The one they said couldn't handle math. He was now the lead quality analyst. 2 desks over sat Lily, a quiet young woman who used to hide in the back of my class, now designing complex data models. "Do you remember Mrs. Klein?" Stephen asked, walking over. "My old principal? She said I'd never make it past high school." "I remember," I said softly. "She sent me an email last week," he continued. "She saw our company in the paper. She said she's proud of me." His eyes glistened. "I didn't know I needed that until I read it." I smiled. "Sometimes people change when they see proof." He nodded. "Yeah. Proof." That night, as I drove home, I thought about how Ethan's entire life had been about proof, not just proving others wrong, but proving what was real, what mattered. And now, somehow, that instinct for truth had become his gift to others. Weeks later, I received an email from the Autism Center, where Rachel volunteered. The subject line read, "Donation request for sensory room expansion." They were building a new space for children who struggled with noise and light. I donated anonymously. It felt right. But curiosity won out. A few days later, I stopped by the center with a box of supplies. Rachel was there, kneeling on the floor beside a little boy who reminded me painfully of Ethan, at 5 hands over his ears, rocking gently, trying to make sense of a world too loud. Rachel's hair was pulled back. She wore no makeup, her clothes simple and worn. She looked up and froze when she saw me. For a long time, we just stared at each other. The past stretched between us like a chasm too wide to cross. Finally, she stood and walked over slowly. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was quieter now, stripped of the sharpness I remembered. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I didn't plan to be," I said. "I was just dropping these off." She nodded, glancing toward the children. "They're amazing. Every one of them." I didn't understand before. Her eyes glistened. I think maybe I didn't want to. Um, there was a tremor in her voice that I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. You're helping them now, I said carefully. I'm trying, she whispered. I've been here almost every day since the sentencing. It's hard sometimes, seeing them, knowing what I walked away from. You're learning, I said. That counts. She met my eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. Then maybe that's a start, I replied. She swallowed, her chin trembling. Is he okay? He's more than okay. A faint smile touched her lips. He always was. When I turned to leave, she stopped me. Mom, she said softly, tell him I'm proud of him. I didn't promise I would, but I didn't say I wouldn't either. That night, I told Ethan about the encounter as we sat in his kitchen eating leftovers. He listened without looking up, just quietly chewing, his yellow cup beside him like always. When I finished, he set down his fork. She's volunteering? Yes, I said. She's working with autistic kids. He was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, he said, Good. That was all. But in his tone, I heard something deeper: acceptance, maybe even peace. A few months later, he invited me to a small dinner at his office to celebrate the company's one-year anniversary. He decorated the space himself, strings of soft white lights, music low and slow, tables set with mismatched plates. Every employee had brought a dish. I learned to drive the same route to therapy every morning because one wrong turn could set off a meltdown. I learned not to touch him unless he initiated it first. Most importantly, I learned to watch. 2 weeks after he arrived, I found him on the living room floor at dawn, surrounded by a pile of toy cars I'd bought. He wasn't just lining them up. He was arranging them by color, but in gradients so subtle, I had to squint to see the differences. Red to orange. Red to pure orange to yellow. Ethan stood at the front, awkwardly clearing his throat before speaking. I'm not good with speeches, he began, his voice low but steady. But I want to say thank you. When I built TruthRed, I didn't know if it would work. I just knew I wanted a place where people like me could be enough. He paused, scanning the room. You are. All of you. I felt tears sting my eyes. After the dinner, he came over and handed me a small envelope. For you, N. Inside was a business card with his company logo and my name printed beneath it. Vivian Cooper, advisor. I don't know anything about technology, I said, laughing softly. You know people, he said, and that's harder. I kept that card in my wallet. Months later, I received a letter from Rachel. It wasn't long, just 2 pages. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't make excuses. She wrote about the children at the center, how they'd taught her patience, how she was learning to sit in silence without running from it. At the end, she wrote, I see him in every child who lines up their toys or covers their ears. I see what I missed, and I live with that. But I'm grateful you didn't. I cried reading it, not out of anger but release. That weekend, I drove to Ethan's apartment. We had our usual dinner, quiet and familiar. As he washed his cup, I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, eyes scanning each line. When he finished, he folded it neatly and set it on the counter. She's changing, I said. He nodded once. Maybe. Do you want to see her? He hesitated. Not yet. That's okay, I said. You don't have to. He looked at me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. Do you? I thought about it. Yes, I said finally. But not to talk about the past, just to see the woman trying to do better. He considered that for a moment, then said, That's fair. We didn't speak of it again. But I knew he'd read that letter more than once. That summer, TruthRed grew from 6 employees to 15. A national magazine featured Ethan's story, not the sensational autistic prodigy headline the local news had used years before, but a thoughtful piece titled The Boy Who Built Proof. It focused on his company's mission to create technology that saw truth the way he did, with clarity, structure, and compassion. When I read the article, one line stayed with me. Ethan Cooper doesn't design software to catch lies. He designs it to protect what's real. It was exactly who he was. Late that year, I attended a fundraiser for the Autism Center. The event was held in the same hall where Rachel once had her high school graduation. Life has a cruel sense of poetry. Rachel was there, helping with the setup, her movements careful, deliberate. When she saw me, she approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. "They're free," she said awkwardly. "Thank you." We stood side by side, neither of us quite knowing what to say. After a moment, she whispered, "I saw the article about Ethan. I cut it out." Her voice broke. "He looks like you when he smiles." "He doesn't smile much," I said. "Neither did I," she said softly. "Maybe now he can." We stayed there for a moment longer. 2 women bound by love and regret, watching children chase balloons across the room. There was no forgiveness spoken that night. But maybe forgiveness doesn't always need words. Sometimes it's just the quiet understanding that what's broken doesn't always stay broken. When I got home, Ethan called. "You went to the fundraiser," he said. "Yes." "You saw her?" "Yes." A pause. "Did she look okay?" "She looked human," I said. "That's a good start." He didn't reply, but I could almost hear the faint sound of him exhaling, like a door quietly unlocking. That night, I dreamed of the first day he came to live with me. The small boy with the too light backpack, the yellow cup, the frightened eyes. I dreamed of how far we had come, and how every act of love had been its own kind of proof, because that's what love is, in the end, a record of what's real. If you're still here, listening to this story, maybe you've known a kind of love that hurts and heals in equal measure. Maybe you've been the one left behind, holding everything together with trembling hands, wondering if love was ever enough. I used to think being a mother meant protecting your child from pain. But time and life taught me something deeper. Sometimes being a mother means standing still when everyone else walks away. It means choosing presence over pride, truth over comfort. Every shade perfect. "That's amazing, Ethan," I whispered. He didn't look up, but his rocking slowed. By December, Rachel still hadn't called. I stopped trying to make him talk or meet my eyes. I focused on routine: breakfast, therapy, snack, nap, dinner, bedtime, the same every day. Slowly, he calmed. He wasn't happy, but he wasn't terrified anymore either. On Christmas Eve, I baked sugar cookies. Ethan didn't help, but he sat at the table watching the dough being cut into stars and trees. It means staying, even when staying breaks you. When Rachel left, I thought I'd failed her. When Ethan stopped speaking, I thought I'd failed him too. But love has a strange way of showing up in silence. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums quietly in the background, like the refrigerator Ethan once feared, reminding you that life goes on even when it feels impossible. Ethan built his empire not from ambition, but from the desire to prove what was real. And in the process, he taught me something I'd spent 68 years trying to learn: that truth and love aren't loud, and they don't demand attention. They simply exist, steady, patient, undeniable. Rachel is still at that autism center. She sends me cards now, short notes, sometimes just a single sentence. "Had a breakthrough with a student today." Or, "I understand him a little more each week." She hasn't asked for forgiveness, and I haven't offered it outright. But forgiveness isn't a transaction, it's a process. It's the quiet choice to let go, again and again. And Ethan, my brilliant, steady boy, he's still building, still seeing patterns in places the rest of us overlook. He once told me, "Grandma, the world lies a lot. But if you look closely enough, the truth always leaves fingerprints. That's what this story is about. Not success or revenge, but fingerprints. Proof of love, proof of survival, proof that what's real will always rise through the cracks of what's false. So if you're listening now, maybe this is your reminder. The people who truly love you don't always say it the loudest. They show up, they stay. They keep believing in your worth long after the world has forgotten it. Because love, the real kind, doesn't ask for recognition. It just keeps showing up in the yellow cup, in the quiet mornings, in the proof that we are still here. If this story touched you, stay a little longer with us. There are more stories like this. Stories about love that survives the unthinkable. Subscribe, stay close, and remember, what's real doesn't fade. It just waits to be seen. The kitchen smelled like butter and vanilla. For a moment, it felt almost normal. Then the phone rang. Rachel, her voice was flat, drained. "Mom, thank God," I said, relief flooding through me. "When are you coming to get him? He needs you." I can't do this anymore, Mom." I froze. "What?" "He's yours." I tried. I really tried, but I can't. Her voice cracked. "I just can't." "Rachel, wait." The line went dead. I stood there, with the phone in my hand, the smell of burning cookies filling the air. Smoke curled from the oven. I turned it off, pulled out the blackened tray, and sank to the floor, my back against the cabinet. Ethan appeared in the doorway. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he walked to the counter, picked up the yellow cup, and brought it to me. He set it gently on the floor beside me. I looked at the cup, then at him. He turned and went back to the living room. That was the first time he showed me love in his own quiet way. I sat there on the kitchen floor, holding that little yellow cup, and cried until my body ached. That night, I tucked him into bed, no blanket this time, no forced goodnight. I stood in the doorway and whispered, "I'm here, Ethan. I'm not going anywhere." He hummed softly, the same low sound as always. But this time, it didn't sound scared. It sounded almost peaceful. From that night on, I never called Rachel again. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. I would raise Ethan, whatever it took, and though I didn't know it then, those simple words "I'm here" would become the foundation of everything that followed. Every routine, every battle, every victory, because love, I learned, isn't loud. Sometimes, it's just the quiet promise you make to a child who can't look you in the eye but still feels every word you mean. The years that followed blurred together, one day folding gently into the next. There were no sudden miracles, no grand transformations, just small, patient steps. I learned that progress for a child like Ethan didn't come in leaps, but in whispers. Every morning began the same. Scrambled eggs, toast cut corner to corner, and his yellow cup filled halfway with water. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft clink of my fork against the plate, these sounds became the rhythm of our life. Predictable, safe. When he turned 6, Ethan developed a fascination with a set of magnetic letters I'd bought on a whim. At first, he only sorted them by color, then by shape. Then he started arranging them into patterns, rows upon rows of symbols that looked meaningless, until I realized he was creating sequences, mapping his world in letters the way other children used crayons to draw houses and trees. One afternoon, I found him tracing circles and lines into a little notebook he carried everywhere. He didn't write words yet, only marks. When I asked his therapist, Dr. Lynn, about it, she smiled softly and said, "He's tracking his world. It's how he finds order in the chaos. Let him." So I did. Notebook after notebook filled up. Circles, lines, and later letters. Then words. Egg, toast, school, home. He began to understand that symbols could mean something. By the time he was 8, he was writing full sentences. Egg and toast, Grandma reads. No loud today. Stay with me, and don't forget to support the channel. It was a gray Friday afternoon in November of 2010 when Rachel arrived. The air smelled like rain, and the neighborhood trees were shedding their last yellow leaves onto the sidewalk. She stood on my porch, coat half-buttoned, hair unbrushed, eyes hollow. Beside her was Ethan, only 5 years old, rocking from heel to toe with his hands clamped tightly over his ears. He didn't look up, didn't speak. His letters were neat, printed carefully, as if each one was a tiny piece of control over a world that often overwhelmed him. Then, one spring morning, everything changed. I was making breakfast when he looked up from his notebook and said, clear as daylight, "Why did Mom leave?" The spatula slipped from my hand. 3 years of silence, and then this. His voice sounded unsure but determined, like a bird testing its wings. She said she couldn't handle it. I whispered. He nodded once, looked down, and wrote something in his notebook. Then he went back to his eggs. I walked into the bathroom and cried so quietly that he wouldn't hear. Not from sadness, but from awe. He had spoken. He had asked the question that haunted both of us, and I had told him the truth. That became our rhythm. Truth and routine. The same breakfast, the same yellow cup, the same quiet honesty. A year later, when he turned 9, his school called. "Mrs. Cooper, we need to discuss Ethan's placement," said Principal Andrews, his voice carefully polite. "His new teacher, Mrs. Brennan, feels he'd be better served in our special education classroom." "Better served how?" I asked. "He struggles socially. He won't participate in group work. He avoids eye contact. The other students are moving at a different pace. Is he behind academically?" A pause. "No. Actually, his scores are above grade level. But education isn't just about academics, it's about social development." I gripped the phone tighter. "You mean he's too different for your comfort?" "Mrs. Cooper, I want an IEP meeting," I said. We scheduled it for Friday. I spent 3 days preparing. Years of teaching had taught me how schools worked. The quiet politics, the paperwork that decided fates. I gathered every progress report, every therapy evaluation, every scrap of proof that Ethan wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. The meeting room smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. Principal Andrews sat at the head of the table. Beside him was Mrs. Brennan, smiling a teacher's sympathetic smile. Across from them, the special education coordinator and a school psychologist flipped through folders. "Ethan is a bright boy," Mrs. Brennan began, "but he struggles to connect. During group time, he sits alone. He won't sing during music class. He covered his ears yesterday when the bell rang." Does he do his work?" I asked. "Yes, but then he's learning. Isn't that the point of school?" The psychologist cleared her throat. "Social interaction is also critical for development. We have a wonderful program that caters specifically to children with his needs." "Children who can't keep up," I said quietly. "That's not what we mean," she replied, her tone softening. "But it is," I said. "You want to move him because he doesn't fit your version of normal." Silence. Principal Andrews leaned forward. "Mrs. Cooper, we understand your concern, but our goal is to ensure the least restrictive environment." "Exactly," I said. "And according to the law, that means keeping him in a mainstream classroom with proper supports, not isolating him." He frowned. "What supports would you suggest?" "Noise, canceling headphones for loud environments, extra time during transitions, a quiet space when he feels overwhelmed. You call it accommodation, I call it respect." The room went still. Finally, the principal sighed. "We'll draft an IEP with those accommodations. But if Ethan continues to struggle, he won't," I said. I didn't actually know that. But I knew one thing. Giving up wasn't an option. That night, I spread every paper from the meeting across the kitchen table and organized them into a thick binder. Color-coded tabs: medical, educational, therapy, legal. My teacher's instincts kicked in. Documentation was armor. Ethan wandered in from the living room, where he'd been watching his favorite show. He stood silently, studying the papers. "What are you doing?" he asked. His voice had grown stronger over the year, less hesitant, more certain. "Making sure no one forgets what you're capable of," I said. He peered at the tabs, his eyes scanning the color-coded system. "You should sort them by date, then by type," he said. "Speech therapy separate from occupational therapy." I blinked. "Show me." Ugh. He sat down beside me and rearranged the entire binder with the precision of a librarian. It made perfect sense, more sense than my own system. When he was done, he closed the binder neatly. "Better," he said. I smiled. "Much better." It was the first time I truly saw how his mind worked, not as broken, but brilliant. The following year, his speech therapist recommended a communication tablet, something that would let him type when words were hard to speak. The backpack slung across his tiny shoulders looked almost empty. "Just for the weekend, Mom," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "I need a break. Please." I should have known. There was something in her tone that felt final, a faint echo of goodbye hiding behind the word break. But I was tired from work, and hope makes fools of mothers. "All right," I said. "A weekend." Before I could ask anything else, she was already backing away, fumbling for her car keys. She didn't kiss Ethan goodbye. I saved for months and bought it for his 10th birthday. He mastered it in a day. Within a week, he had scanned every page of his notebooks into it. When I asked why, he said, "So I don't lose them." From then on, everything mattered. Every schedule, every receipt, every note I left on the fridge, he scanned them all. He was building a record of his world, a digital trail of truth. At the therapy center, during parent coffee breaks, other mothers would ask me how I stayed so calm. "I don't handle him," I said once, stirring my cup. "I listen to him." "But what about patience?" one woman asked. "I lose mine every day." I thought about it. I stopped trying to make him someone else. I just try to understand who he is. She stared at me like I'd said something profound. But it wasn't wisdom. It was survival. Ethan's gift was patterns. He noticed things no one else did. Once, on the drive to therapy, he said, "The traffic light on 4th Street is off. It stays red 45 seconds longer than the others." I laughed it off until the next week, when I timed it. He was right. At the grocery store, he would check the receipt and point to errors: 3 cents here, 5 cents there. Always right. He didn't just see the world, he decoded it. By the time he was 11, he corrected his teacher during math class, politely but publicly. "That's wrong," he said. And when she checked, he was right. I got another call from the school. "He embarrassed me," the teacher said. "He needs to learn boundaries." "He's 11," I replied. "He sees truth before he sees manners. Maybe we should learn from him." They didn't like that. But I didn't care. One night, over dinner, he asked, "Why do people want me to be different?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Because they're scared of people who see more than they do." He nodded, thinking. Then he went back to eating his eggs. That was Ethan. Sharp, calm, unshakable. The world could misunderstand him all it wanted. I knew better. He wasn't difficult. He was extraordinary. And though I didn't know it then, his gift for patterns, the same gift people tried to correct, would one day save us both. When Ethan turned 12, everything about him seemed to shift: his posture, his tone, even the way he watched the world. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but a quiet expansion, like something inside him had finally clicked into place. He was no longer the frightened little boy rocking in the corner. He'd become methodical, precise, almost analytical in everything he did. It started with my old laptop. I'd left it on the kitchen counter one afternoon while paying bills, and when I came back from folding laundry, Ethan was sitting in front of it. The screen was filled with strange text, symbols, brackets, and words that looked like a foreign language. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't look up. "Learning Python." "Python?" I blinked. "Is that about snakes?" "No," he said flatly. "It's a programming language." He said it like I should already know that. I leaned closer, watching lines of code scroll across the screen. "Where did you learn this?" "Online tutorials." "Is this for school?" "No." He paused, still typing. "I just want to learn it." And that summer, while other kids rode bikes or swam in backyard pools, Ethan sat at the kitchen table coding from sunrise to sunset. I'd bring him sandwiches, and he'd eat without looking away from the screen. His yellow cup sat beside him, always half full of water he rarely remembered to drink. At first, I worried he was isolating himself even more, but when I peeked over his shoulder one day, I saw what he was building: small programs that sorted files, checked for duplicates, organized folders by date. They weren't games, they were systems. Order, precision, logic. "That's really impressive," I said softly. He nodded once, not smiling, just acknowledging the observation. By August, my old laptop could barely keep up. It froze every few minutes, and Ethan would sit there, waiting patiently, tapping the desk with his fingers. I took what was left of my savings and bought him a new computer for his 13th birthday. The man at the store asked what it was for. "Programming," Ethan said. "How old are you?" the man asked. 12. The man smiled. "That's a good age to start. You'll go far." Ethan didn't reply. He just looked at the computer box like it was a key to something invisible. At home, he set it up in his room. I made him promise to come out for meals and to sleep at reasonable hours. She didn't even look back as her taillights disappeared down Maple Drive. The silence that followed was heavy enough to press on my chest. Ethan kept rocking. The sound of the wind scraping the dry leaves across the porch made him flinch. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. "Do you want to come inside?" He didn't move. I picked up his backpack. It felt too light. No extra clothes, no favorite toy, no toothbrush, just a coloring book and one crumpled t-shirt. My stomach sank. He agreed, but I knew his mind was already somewhere else. A few weeks later, he called me into his room. "I want to show you something." On the screen was a text document, ordinary sentences. He ran his program, and suddenly numbers appeared, long strings of digits. "That's the document's signature," he said, "like a fingerprint." He changed one word and ran it again. The numbers changed. "So you can tell if someone edits something?" I asked. "Yes, and when?" He turned to me for a brief second, his eyes steady. "It proves what's real." Those words settled deep into my chest. I didn't understand the technology, but I understood the purpose. My grandson, the boy who once couldn't stand the sound of the refrigerator, was creating a way to protect truth. Over the next year, his project grew. He called it the chain. It stored documents, verified their authenticity, tracked changes. Every file was connected to another in sequence. If someone tries to change one, he explained, the chain breaks. "Why would someone change them?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because people lie." It wasn't bitterness in his tone, it was certainty. By the time he turned 14, Ethan had digitized everything I owned. My old calendars, bank statements, phone bills, even grocery receipts. At first, I thought it was just another one of his obsessions with order. Then I realized he was building a digital record of our lives, a history no one could rewrite. "What are you doing all this for?" I asked one night as he scanned another stack of papers. "So nothing gets lost," he said. so no one can pretend something happened when it didn't. His words chilled me, though I didn't fully understand why. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see the glow from under his door. He'd be typing, completely absorbed. I'd knock softly. "Ethan, it's 2 in the morning. You need to sleep." "Almost done," he'd reply. But he was never done. By 15, he had refined his system into a full verification software, something that could detect forged documents, altered timestamps, fake signatures. He told me it could even trace digital fingerprints hidden in files. When the pandemic hit in 2020 and the world shut down, Ethan barely noticed. He was already used to isolation, already fluent in the language of computers. "I want to show you something," he said one afternoon in May. I followed him into his room. 3 monitors now, all glowing with codes and graphs. The air hummed with electricity. He opened his software, a clean interface with buttons labeled Verify, Compare, and Analyze. "What does it do?" I asked. "It proves if a document is real," he said. "It checks metadata, signatures, timestamps. It sees what people can't." Oh, I watched, speechless, as the program analyzed a test document. Within seconds, it flagged an alteration. "So, you can tell if someone forged something?" "Yes." He turned to me. "People lie, Grandma, but data doesn't." He said it like a promise. Within a month, he'd sold the first license to a small security firm for $20,000. I almost dropped the phone when I saw the payment confirmation. "Ethan," I said, "that's more than I made in an entire semester of teaching." He only shrugged. "It's a proof of concept." A few months later, larger offers came. Corporations, security firms, fraud prevention companies. They all wanted his software. I called a lawyer, a kind man named James Nakamura, to help us navigate the contracts. He spread 3 different proposals across our kitchen table one Saturday morning. "These are substantial," he said, looking at Ethan. "You built something valuable." Ethan nodded. "Which one is best?" James explained each. Licensing agreements, long-term royalties, acquisition offers. Ethan listened carefully, asking questions I barely understood. Then, after a long pause, he said, "I want to sell it completely. No licensing. Just sell it and be done." "Are you sure?" James asked. "You could make more in the long run." "There's a non-compete clause," Ethan said. 5 years. I can't make another verification program during that time." And that's okay with you?" "Yes," Ethan said. "I'm done with this kind of software." He said it like he'd already planned his next step. In March 2021, at 16 years old, my grandson sold his software for $3.2 million. I'd worked 35 years as a teacher and never made even half of that. I couldn't wrap my head around it. When the local news found out, they wanted to interview him. Still, I opened the door and waited. After nearly a full minute, Ethan stepped across the threshold, still covering his ears. Inside, the hum of the refrigerator made him flinch again. When the heater clicked on, he whimpered. "It's okay," I whispered, lowering my voice as if I were in a church. "You're safe here." He went straight to the corner of the living room and crouched beside the bookshelf, staring at the carpet. I didn't want them turning him into an inspirational story, but Ethan said yes. The reporter, a young woman named Kate, sat in our living room, lights glaring, cameras humming. "Can you explain what your software does?" she asked. "It verifies document authenticity," Ethan said simply. "It catches forgeries." "What made you want to create this?" "I wanted to know what was real," he said. "People lie. Documents don't if you know how to read them." Kate smiled awkwardly, clearly hoping for something warmer. "And what will you do with the money?" "I don't know yet." She tried to draw more out of him, but Ethan stayed calm, factual, no fluff. The segment aired on Friday evening. Local teen creates revolutionary software, the headline said. They showed him typing, the glow of his screens, my old yellow cup on the desk beside him. I thought it was over. But that broadcast changed everything. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Rachel stood there for the first time in 11 years. She wore a gray designer suit and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Beside her stood a man in a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase. "Hi, Mom," she said. My throat went dry. "Rachel?" "Ethan," she called, peering past me into the house. He appeared in the hallway, silent, unreadable. "I'm Stephen Walsh," the man said smoothly, "Mrs. Cooper's attorney. We'd like to discuss Ethan's situation." "Ugh, his situation?" I managed to say. Rachel smiled a slow, calculated smile. "It's important. May we come in?" I should have said no. I should have slammed the door. But before I could speak, Ethan said calmly, "Let them in." And just like that, the storm I'd feared for 11 years finally stepped across my threshold. They sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Ethan and I had eaten breakfast every morning for over a decade. The same table where I had helped him learn to write, where he'd built the bones of the program that changed our lives. Now, it felt like foreign territory. Rachel crossed her legs neatly, her hands folded in front of her. The man beside her opened his briefcase with a soft click. "Mrs. Cooper," he began smoothly, "I'm here on behalf of my client, Miss Rachel Cooper. We're here to discuss custody and financial guardianship of Ethan." The words barely made sense. "Custody?" I repeated. "Yes," he said, with a practiced nod. "Ethan is still a minor. As his legal mother, Miss Cooper maintains full parental rights and wishes to resume active custody, particularly in light of recent financial developments." Ethan sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, eyes fixed on Rachel. His face didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. Rachel's voice softened, taking on that familiar false sweetness. "Mom, I know you've done a wonderful job with him. I do. But now that he's earned what he has, he needs proper guidance. His mother's guidance." I stared at her, feeling my pulse in my temples. "You left him," I said quietly. "You walked away for 11 years. Her lawyer slid a neat stack of papers toward me. "My client has maintained her parental rights throughout that time. Here are documents confirming consistent financial support and contact." I looked down. Custody forms, notarized letters, bank records showing supposed deposits, visitation logs all neatly printed, all stamped with official-looking seals. "They're fake," I said. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "They're filed with the county," he replied evenly. "Unless you have proof otherwise, the burden of falsification rests with you." I turned to Rachel, who was pretending to look regretful. "Why are you doing this?" She sighed dramatically. "Because he's my son. And because he's a child handling adult money. He needs someone who understands the world. He understands the world better than either of us," I said, but she wasn't listening. Ethan didn't speak. He just watched her with that unreadable calm that always unnerved people who didn't know him. After a long silence, he said quietly, "We'll get a lawyer." Rachel blinked, startled. "Ethan." "Honey." He didn't answer. He just stood up and left the room. The next day, I found a family law attorney through a friend, Linda Reyes, a woman with sharp eyes and 20 years of experience. She came to the house because I couldn't bear to leave Ethan alone. I laid everything out for her binders full of reports, therapy notes, receipts, school meetings, everything I had saved since Rachel dropped Ethan off with that single backpack. Linda listened patiently. I'd taught elementary school for 35 years, and I'd had autistic students in my class before. But teaching them for a few hours a day with aides and specialists wasn't the same as living with one. Standing there, watching my grandson rock back and forth, I realized how little I really knew. "Are you hungry?" I asked. No response. "Thirsty?" Still nothing. I poured a little water into a yellow plastic cup I kept for him from his rare visits. When I handed her the fake documents Rachel's lawyer had given me, she went through them slowly, page by page. After nearly an hour, she looked up. "They look legitimate," she said. "They're not," I said. "I know they're not." "I believe you," she said gently. "But proving it might be difficult. Without concrete evidence these documents are forged, the court will treat them as real." "But I raised him," I whispered. "Every meal, every doctor's visit, every therapy session. She didn't even call." Linda hesitated. "Did you ever file for legal guardianship?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I didn't think I needed to." She abandoned him. "Unfortunately," Linda said, "without a court order or formal termination of parental rights, she's still his legal parent. The law doesn't recognize emotional truth, it recognizes paperwork." Her words hit like a blow. "So she can just take him?" I asked. "She's not asking for physical custody," Linda said. "Not yet. She's asking for financial guardianship control over his assets until he turns 18. $3.2 million. That was what this was about. Linda leaned forward. "We can fight this, but unless we can prove her documents are forged, it's going to be a steep uphill battle." When she left, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the yellow cup sitting beside the sink. It had always been Ethan's comfort object. Now it looked fragile, like the thin line between truth and lies that our lives rested on. I didn't hear Ethan come in until he was standing behind me. "She's going to win," I said without turning. "No," he said simply. "She has papers, signatures, notaries. The judge will believe her." He didn't respond, just rested his hand on the back of my chair for a moment. That was all. 2 weeks later, the depositions began. Rachel went first. I sat in the back of the conference room beside Linda, my stomach twisting into knots. Rachel looked every bit the part of a responsible mother. Pressed gray sweater, minimal makeup, her hair framing her face in soft waves. When her lawyer asked how she'd maintained contact, she smiled as though remembering something tender. "I called regularly," she said. "Visited whenever I could. I sent money orders every few months. I couldn't take full custody because I wanted Ethan to have stability with my mother while I got back on my feet." Every word was a lie, but it sounded perfect. She even had details, dates, amounts, made-up phone calls and visits that lined up perfectly with the fake documents. When her lawyer asked why she was seeking custody now, she placed a hand to her chest. "Because Ethan is approaching adulthood. I want to help him manage his success. He needs his mother." The way she said it made my blood boil. Afterward, Linda pulled me aside. "She's composed, consistent, and her documentation supports her story. Without hard evidence to refute it, this is going to be tough." Ethan's deposition came next. He answered every question calmly, sometimes even too literally. "Do you remember your mother visiting?" "I don't recall specific visits," he said. "Did she call?" "I'd have to check my records." Linda asked him about me. "Can you describe your relationship with your grandmother?" "She takes care of me. She's always been there." "Do you want to live with her?" "Yes." "Do you want your mother managing your money?" "No." Simple. Honest. But I could tell Linda was worried. Judges didn't favor brief answers over emotional ones. On the drive home, she sighed. "He's brilliant, but his manner may work against us. He doesn't express emotion in a way people understand." Oh, I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it, that my grandson's calm, his precision, his truth, could be mistaken for detachment. That night, I found Ethan in his room typing. The light from his monitors glowed blue across his face. "I don't know what to do," I said softly. "We're going to lose." He didn't stop typing. "Tell the truth tomorrow," he said. "She has proof." Fake proof, he said. Then how do we fight that? He looked up for the first time. By proving what's real. His tone was steady, but his eyes burned with something fierce, something unshakable. The night before the hearing, I woke at 3 in the morning and saw the light still glowing under his door. The soft, rhythmic sound of his keyboard filled the hallway. I wanted to tell him to rest, but something stopped me. I knew that sound, it was focus. It was purpose. At 7 the next morning, he emerged in the shirt we'd bought for court. He looked older somehow, his posture straight, his face calm. I set it on the floor, an arm's length away. He glanced at it, then went back to rocking. I left him there, unsure what to do next. That first night, I made chicken nuggets and fries. Rachel once told me that's all he would eat. Ethan took one look at the plate and turned away. I tried macaroni and cheese, then a sandwich, then applesauce. Nothing. Finally, I handed him a few crackers. He ate 3. When bedtime came, I tried to help him brush his teeth. He screamed. "You ready?" I asked. "Yes," he said. We drove in silence to the courthouse. My hands trembled the entire way. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and polish. Rachel sat at the opposite table, her lawyer beside her, both looking polished and composed. When the hearing began, Rachel's lawyer spoke first, weaving his lies like silk. "My client, Miss Cooper, has maintained consistent involvement in her son's life. Financially supportive, emotionally available. Her rights were never terminated, and she seeks only to guide her son responsibly as he enters adulthood." The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, nodded thoughtfully as she examined the documents. Rachel took the stand, answering every question smoothly. She even remembered specific birthdays, fabricated phone calls, and fictional letters she claimed to have sent me. Each lie layered carefully atop the next, until it began to sound almost true. When it was our turn, Linda presented my binders, school reports, therapy notes, receipts, all real, all detailed. But I could see it in the judge's eyes. Sympathy, but uncertainty. "Mrs. Cooper," the judge said gently, "these records show you've been the primary caregiver, but there's no formal guardianship paperwork. Without that, your daughter's legal claim stands." I felt the room tilt. Rachel smiled faintly at her lawyer. I turned to Ethan, whispering, "She's lying. We have to stop her." He leaned slightly toward me. "Let her talk." "What?" "Let her say everything she wants to say." I stared at him, confused. But something in his eyes, calm, almost surgical, made me stop arguing. Then the judge asked, "Does the young man wish to speak?" Ethan stood. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. His voice was steady. "I have evidence." My breath caught. He lifted his backpack onto the table and took out his laptop. "May I connect this to the display?" he asked. The judge frowned. "What are you presenting?" "Verification of document authenticity," he said, "and timeline evidence." Rachel's lawyer immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." But Ethan had already connected the cable. The courtroom screen flickered to life. Rows of numbers and graphs appeared. "These documents," he said, gesturing to the stack Rachel's lawyer had submitted, "claim to have been created between 2011 and 2020. But the metadata shows they were all created 6 weeks ago, right after the news story aired." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Rachel's lawyer tried again. "Metadata can be altered." Ethan's tone didn't change. "Not when verified through cross-hashed blockchain encryption. The original timestamps prove these files didn't exist before the broadcast." The judge leaned forward. "Explain." "In simple terms, they're fake," Ethan said. "All of them." "Oh." And then, with the calm precision that had always defined him, he began to dismantle his mother's lies, one document at a time. The courtroom fell utterly silent. the kind of silence that presses into your skin and slows time. All I could hear was the soft hum of the projector as Ethan's laptop connected to the screen. His face was expressionless, but his hands moved with calm precision, typing commands, clicking files open, organizing data in neat lines like a surgeon preparing instruments before a delicate operation. Rachel's lawyer adjusted his tie, clearing his throat. Your Honor, if I may, we haven't had the opportunity to review this so-called evidence. I object to its inclusion. Judge Harrison raised a hand. You may object after the presentation, Mr. Walsh. For now, I want to see where this goes. Ethan nodded once in acknowledgement and began. These, he said, pointing to the scanned images of Rachel's custody papers on the display, are the documents claiming my mother maintained contact, sent money, and provided care between 2011 and 2020. But the file properties tell a different story. He clicked, and lines of metadata appeared on the screen. Each row was filled with date stamps, creation logs, editing history, digital fingerprints of truth. These documents were all created on the same device, Ethan continued. A Dell laptop registered to Stephen Walsh using Adobe Acrobat Pro. The creation date for every file is July 10th, 2021, 2 weeks after my interview aired. Rachel's lawyer's jaw twitched. This is absurd. Those dates could be system errors. Anyone can. Ethan didn't even look at him. System errors don't also produce identical hash values across separate PDFs. Not cried, screamed as if I were hurting him. His body trembled. I stepped back, shaken. Okay, I whispered. You can skip it tonight. In the guest room, I tucked the blanket around him, but he threw it off. I tried again. He screamed louder. I left it folded at the foot of the bed and backed out of the room. From the hallway, I could hear him humming a low, steady sound that didn't stop all night. I didn't sleep either. By morning, I was exhausted. I called Rachel. No answer. These were created in bulk, then modified to look older. The judge frowned, leaning forward slightly. Mr. Cooper, you're telling this court that these legal documents are forgeries? Yes, Your Honor, Ethan said plainly. I built a verification system that exposes forgeries by comparing digital patterns. It's the same system I sold last month to Anderson Security for $3.2 million. You could have heard a pin drop. The judge blinked, almost startled. You built this yourself? Yes, Your Honor. I've been developing it since I was 9. Rachel shifted in her seat, her confidence cracking. Her hands clenched together so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Ethan continued. Each legitimate document generates a unique mathematical signature based on its content and creation process. When someone alters that content, the signature changes even if the changes are invisible to the eye. Watch. He opened a test document and ran his software. Numbers flashed across the screen. This is a verified original, he said. Then he changed a single word and ran the analysis again. The numbers changed. This is what your brain can't see, but the data can. The fake documents my mother submitted have inconsistent signatures. He pulled up overlays of Rachel's supposed custody papers, side by side with genuine records from the county clerk's database. Every difference glowed red on the screen. Judge Harrison's expression shifted from curiosity to focus. Show me the proof of origin dates again. Ethan zoomed in on the metadata. Each one links to an internal creation log, all from the same IP address. My mother's attorney's office. The judge's eyes snapped toward Walsh. Mr. Walsh, do you have an explanation? Walsh stammered. Your Honor, this is highly technical. My client provided me with these documents in good faith. Ethan interrupted, calm as ever. Then your client forged them. Or someone on her behalf did. Rachel's face went pale. That's not true, she burst out. I just gathered what I had. I didn't know about any. Mrs. Cooper, the judge said sharply. You will remain silent until asked to speak. Ethan clicked again. My system doesn't stop at document verification. It also builds timelines. He opened a new screen, a calendar filled with rows of entries, receipts, therapy notes, photographs, call logs, all linked together. This is my life, from November 2010 to now, he said. Every event is time-stamped and verified. My grandmother kept records of everything. I digitized it all. He zoomed in on December 2013. My mother claims she visited that month for my birthday. He highlighted the week in question. Here's my grandmother's calendar, therapy attendance logs, and a photo of us decorating cookies at home. No mention of my mother. No gaps in the records. No visits. Click. April 2014, she claims to have sent $500 for therapy. The screen filled with bank statements and receipts. There were no deposits from her, and my grandmother's payment to Dr. Lin is recorded the same week, out of her own checking account. Click. June 2017. My mother claims to have called regularly. Here are our phone records from that entire year. Her number appears 0 times after December 24th, 2010. Oh, gasps rippled through the gallery. Rachel's lawyer began flipping through his folder, as if searching for something that could save him. The judge looked between Ethan and Rachel. Mrs. Cooper, are you disputing this evidence? Rachel's lips parted, but no words came. The data. It could be wrong, she finally whispered. Computers make mistakes. I know I called. I know I sent. Do you have proof? The judge asked. Rachel looked to her lawyer for help, but he was staring down at the table. I don't have receipts. I didn't keep records. I just know I did. Ethan looked up at her, not angry, just heartbreakingly steady. You didn't, he said quietly. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not the fear of losing, but the fear of being seen. Judge Harrison turned to Ethan. Young man, would you be willing to submit your system's analysis for review? Yes, Your Honor. The system is currently under commercial use by Anderson Security. They verified its accuracy before purchase. I can provide their certification. She nodded slowly. That won't be necessary right now. I've seen enough. Her tone had changed. It was no longer patient or probing, it was resolute. She shuffled the forged papers, looked at Rachel, and said firmly, Mrs. Cooper, this court finds that your submitted documents are fraudulent and that your testimony lacks credibility. I left a message, trying to keep my voice calm. Rachel, honey, call me back. I need to know what Ethan eats, what his routine is. No call. I tried again that evening. Then Sunday. Nothing. By the end of the week, the silence was deafening. I took Ethan to the pediatrician. The doctor was kind but direct. He's on the spectrum, he said. Has anyone talked to you about getting him evaluated? His mother was supposed to handle that, I replied. Guardianship and full custody are awarded to Vivian Cooper, effective immediately. I felt my knees go weak. Rachel gasped, her voice breaking. You can't do this. He's my son. The judge's eyes hardened. You abandoned your son. You falsified legal documents in an attempt to claim financial control. This case is being referred to the district attorney for investigation of perjury and fraud. The sound of the gavel struck like thunder. It was over. Rachel turned to me, eyes wild. Mom, please. I shook my head slowly. For the first time, I didn't see my daughter. I saw a stranger who had chosen greed over blood. Ethan quietly disconnected his laptop and placed it in his bag. The entire courtroom seemed frozen, watching this 16-year-old boy pack away his truth. Outside, the spring sun hit us like a blessing. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. I looked at him. You knew, I whispered. You've been preparing for this. He nodded once. Since the day she left. My throat tightened. You were protecting us all along. He didn't smile, but there was something softer in his eyes. People lie, he said. Data doesn't. We walked to the car without another word. For the first time in 11 years, I felt like we were free. Months passed before the world settled again. Rachel pled guilty to submitting falsified records. She was sentenced to 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service at a local autism resource center. When I visited the center months later to drop off donated supplies, I saw her there, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a group of nonverbal children. Her hair was tied back, her makeup gone. She looked exhausted, smaller somehow. The director, not knowing who I was, smiled and said, "That volunteer? She comes early, stays late, says she's trying to learn what she missed." I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her. When our eyes met, neither of us spoke. She gave a faint nod, and I nodded back. That was enough. Back home, Ethan's life moved forward like clockwork. The non-compete clause in his contract meant he couldn't build verification software for 5 years. So he started something new, a company that tested other people's software for accuracy and bugs. "I'm hiring people like me," he told me over breakfast one morning. "Autistic people. We see patterns others miss." His first hire was Stephen, a young man I recognized immediately. I'd taught him in 4th grade years ago a boy the school once said would never hold a job. When I visited their small office, there were 6 desks in total, each occupied by quiet, focused workers wearing headphones. The hum of computers filled the air. Stephen spotted me and smiled shyly. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, "you told my principal once that I wasn't broken, just different." His voice caught. "Ethan says the same thing." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. On the drive home, I thought about the chain Ethan had built, not just in code, but in life. Each act of love, each decision, each record of truth linked together so that no lie could ever destroy it. That night, as I washed dishes, Ethan's yellow cup sat beside the sink, chipped now, faded from years of use, but still standing. Like us. He came up behind me and said softly, "Vivian?" I turned. "I know what you gave up for me." I dried my hands. "Ethan, you don't owe me anything." "I heard you once," he said, "on the phone, turning down a trip because you couldn't leave me. You could have sent me away like she did. You didn't." I swallowed hard. "You were never a burden." He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were enough." I reached across the counter, close enough for him to see the truth in my eyes. "And so were you." He looked down, a faint flicker of emotion crossing his face. "I know that now." We sat in silence for a long moment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between us, the same sound that had terrified him as a child, now just a quiet heartbeat of home. When I left his apartment that night, he texted me as I turned onto Maple Drive. "Thank you." Just 2 words. But for me, they were everything. The months after the court hearing were quieter than I expected. No more lawyers, no more panic-filled nights, no more waiting for phone calls that could change everything. It was just me and Ethan again. Like before, only different, older, steadier, our lives stitched together with scars that no longer hurt to touch. Autumn came early that year. The air outside our little house smelled of rain and pine. Ethan had moved into a small apartment downtown near his new office. He insisted on paying his own rent, though I still brought dinner every Tuesday.